if you think back about your growing up, there was always somebody that was leading at some point in your life. Right? Just there's people that are just very natural at it, and they do it in different situations better than others. A couple quotes. The last one there I'll read here. Exceptional leaders distinguish themselves because of superior self-leadership. And this kind of falls into that. If you're going to be in a position to possibly be called a mentor, right? I don't think anybody says, I'm going to be a mentor. Right? I don't think you can actually ask and achieve. Like, that's just something that happens, right? And I've had plenty of them. I've had actually more than I can probably count on both of my hands. And many of them probably don't even know what they actually meant to me at that time in my life or whatever, but they're all around you if you just take the time to listen. But those people that I chose to listen to and maybe look up to all had something that I looked up to and wanted to be a part of, right? And so that's kind of where that comes from. So I was going through a book a couple years ago, and it was actually an interesting part of my life where my wife and I had adopted some older boys, and it was a real challenge in our home, and things were honestly a pretty big struggle. And so I didn't even feel like I was leading my house well, right? And so I was just kind of carrying this weight, and I was asked to do this leadership course at our church. We have a big church, it's huge, and I'm not going to get all gospel-y on you, so just hear me out here. But we went through this book called Gospel Leadership by Robert Thune, and the first chapter was all about kind of identifying how you specifically lead. Not necessarily, because I am not a church leader, so I don't even know why I was asked to do this class. But I went through this, and it got me thinking about, man, why do I lead the way I do, or why do I react in situations, this way or that? And so it was the first time I'd ever sat down and actually had to write down how I lead in certain ways. And it provoked a lot of thought, so I thought I would share some of this with you. Like most things that I read now, I relate it either to my family and my kids, and my wife and kids, or I relate it to work and how I can lead my guys better. And I'm going to use the term my guys, and hopefully at the end of this you'll kind of see a little bit of why we call them that. But, that's what I relate to. So some of this book, as I was going through it, it was, man, how do I lead the guys at work well? So all of these things kind of came out of that book, and as I was reading it, fear is how we lead in a lot of different situations. You can read all of those statements. A leader who fears disapproval may use leadership in order to be liked. Okay? And some of these may not fit you at all. The last one probably fits me the best, but I don't believe I fear failure and then use that to avoid risk. I haven't really figured out what that last thing is because I don't ever think of it as avoiding risk, but I definitely fear failure. It literally will drive me to do certain things, especially at work. I've had just an amazing career opportunity when Mike's in the back there. When he brought me on at Iowa State, it was a really good opportunity. But obviously, most of the pressure that we all put on ourselves comes from we put on the fields and how they're gonna react and all that stuff really comes from ourself and our self-motivation, right? So I have this huge fear of failing the university, my athletic department, the guys who work for me, all of that, my family, right? I've got to support them somehow. And so that statement really hit home for me, and I had never really put that together. So what I want you guys to do, I'm going to take this from, I don't know if any of you guys, I know that there's a gentleman down here that saw Josh McPherson's talk yesterday. I had this slide already in there, but as I saw Josh's talk, I'm like, I'm going to use this because it'll be better instead of me fumbling through all these questions. I want you guys, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes. There's people around you, grab 3 or 4, and I want you to kind of try to answer those. Just mostly so you can think about it, and then we're going to have a brief conversation on some examples of how you would answer those 5 questions. So, what are you most afraid of as a leader? In your leadership, what do you seek to avoid at all cost? For me, well, I'm going to talk about for me in a second. You're going to have you guys answer these first. What must you have as a leader in order to be satisfied? And you may not have an answer for all of these, but I think you'll have at least one or two. So go through all of these. Give you, like I said, 3 or 4 minutes. I want you to be in a group. I know it's going to be a little awkward at first, but I think you're going to enjoy it after a little while. I just want you to think about it and then come up with a couple answers, and then we'll talk about it in 3 or 4 minutes. Is that fair? All right, good. Even if it's not, it's my talk. So you came here, and we're going to do it anyway. I'm loving the conversation. Hopefully it wasn't just about last night's events. My hope is, like I said, what really made it click for me wasn't necessarily talking out loud like what you guys. I had a little workbook that I was working through, and it was actually writing answers down that I had to think about. So can somebody give me an example of that first question? Like, what was your answer? What are you most afraid of as a leader? Nobody's going to judge you, I promise. Yeah. Not having the right answer. Not having respect. Anybody else? Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Employees lose trust in you. I saw a hand back there. Okay. Backstabbing from underneath. Yeah. Uncertainty of not having a plan. You guys are good at this. How about the next one? What do you avoid at all costs? That's mine as well, Derek. How about another one? If you didn't hear him, he said confrontation. Rush to do things in the last minute. So you like to be prepared. Yes? Not delegating. So you find yourself doing it all yourself all the time. Is that just kind of your fear? Got it. Yep. Any other ones? Yeah.
I would say apathy. I always would err on the side of doing something versus doing nothing. I'm more afraid of I didn't do something that I could have done to be successful or to meet expectations. I'd rather fail swinging than stand there and try to.
That's right. I like it. Any other ones real quick? All right, we'll move on. What must you have as a leader in order to be satisfied? Anybody? Yeah. Team results. That's fantastic. You found it yet? Here and there? Profits. Okay. Any other ones? Yeah. That's a fantastic one. He said complete buy-in by everyone on staff. Right? All right. Any other ones real quick? Actually, doesn't even have to be real quick. It can just be quick or not quick. All right. What makes you angry or sad when trying to lead? Anybody? Come on, don't get quiet now. Breakdown of communication. Does that make you sad or angry? Angry. Any other ones? Yeah. Not knowing how to motivate. Just get you frustrated sometimes? Yes, sir. Lack of complete buy-in. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yep. So you can get angry when they don't do the things that they've been doing. Yeah. It's that like text after 3 months in the summer. Hey, what do you want me to do next? What? Sweep the shop for something. I don't know. What else you got? Go ahead. That's good. They don't reach their full potential, the team, the guys that you... A lot of times, so I think what you're kind of speaking to that is you see more in them than what they're possibly giving. And that can be frustrating for sure. Anything else? Lack of effort. Yeah, that one can get to me sometimes. Yeah. All right, fill in the blank. If people knew blank, they wouldn't follow me. Anybody have any good one or two words there? My insecurities. That's a really good one. Anybody else? Oh man, that's good. If people knew my wife, they wouldn't follow me. That's fantastic. Oh, that's funny. Any others?
I think my drive for perfection, that will probably intimidate a bunch of people.
Yep.
Because they'd be like, well, we think we should never make it right. And they're probably true, but then I got to lower my standards.
That's good. Anybody else have one? So I was like you. I feel so probably the two that hit home the most for me when is kind of that second question, avoid at all costs. I don't like conflict. My wife would tell you I don't like conflict. I usually try to just smooth every situation out as much as I can. And that can bode well in a lot of situations, but it can also, bite you as well. Sometimes just conflict needs to happen, whether it's an employee that just needs to be kind of told where he's at, right, or he or she's at, or whatever situation. That one's a struggle for me. I don't necessarily feel comfortable within conflict. And then that last one is much like you. It was how inadequate I feel, right? And so those were the things that I was pondering as I was going through this, and it just kind of was like, man, if I didn't even realize that I felt inadequate until I had to fill that blank in, and then it was kind of hit home for me. And so it just kind of changed my perspective a little bit on just what my natural leadership capabilities are. All right. So the talk about being a transformational leader. So if you're here maybe because you obviously all lead somebody, right? Like we've already talked about, you lead yourself. But my guess is you have influence on other people, whether it be your kids or your coworkers or whatever. And to be that transformational leader, that's where you've kind of got to have this mindset of people, in my experience anyway, if you tell them how to act, it's kind of like that father with an 18-year-old, right? You can't tell an 18-year-old kid what to do very well anyway. There's that time in adolescence, and at least it was for me, like 18 to 23, 24, where I thought I knew everything already, right? Like you couldn't tell me anything I didn't know. And especially in kind of life's journey. So to have a lot of patience with the younger generation is you've got to put yourself kind of back in their position a little bit. Like remember back when you were 18, did you listen to what older people would tell you about, I don't know if I'd do it that way. Or that situation that you're finding yourself in, you might want to do X, Y, and Z. And, a lot of times, I just still had to walk down that road and see what really happened at the end of it. A lot of times it was dropping off of a cliff. But, so the transformational leader's desire to serve and develop others, right? So I think a lot of us as leaders, we've got to take that mindset. We're not going to change somebody, but you serve them and you develop them, right? And sooner or later, hopefully, they can kind of get to that point where they're seeing their full potential. That second statement, values people more than the position, right? So, many of you are in a leadership position at work. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here. Or you at least are trying to be in that position. And that position doesn't mean anything in your life, right? At the end of your days, what's going to matter most? What title you held, or the people that you were able to influence. And if you can kind of take a back seat from chasing the money, chasing the title, chasing the whatever, and go, man, if I can influence as many people as I possibly can along this journey, my impact on this world will be greater. And so just to kind of think about it in that way. And then this last statement is one that I try to do, okay? So strength comes from the relationships, moral authority, growth of others, and the respect that they have earned, okay? And it's that relationships part. I believe that you cannot be a leader to anybody until you have a relationship with that person. And it's not, and believe me, I'm not promoting going out, I'm not promoting being best friends with your coworkers, anything like that. But you at least need to know a little bit about them and have a relationship with them, right? All right. Enough about that stuff, unless anybody has any questions on it. Any more to add? Anybody burning desire to answer one of these questions? Great. So the next part is kind of to train the next generation. I'm glad Joel just got here. He was a student that I did the talk with a couple years ago that I was talking about. Obviously, he's on time. But the next couple slides are actually pulled from that, and it's more to give you just a perspective on, how to communicate with the next generation a little bit, okay? Because most of us are getting older, and for my situation, they all stay the same age, all my guys, for the most part. And so how do we do that? And as I was thinking about this, how does somebody, so I just turned 40 in December, and actually that wasn't the hardest birthday I've had. The hardest one I had was 36, because at age 36, I then became twice the age of all incoming freshmen at Iowa State University. And it was like, I am no longer, in my mind, that was like, I can no longer really be, I can't relate as well. I'm absolutely the next generation, right? So 40 was easy because I was already well past that, and so 36 bothered me, and so it's how can I possibly communicate effectively when I'm twice their age? And I'm seriously, let me know if you have the answer. I'm still trying to figure it out. I try to do well with it, and there's a couple of my student workers here that I think they're here. Well, actually, I'm glad they're here because I'm hoping they'll just raise their hand and call BS on anything I say here. But just know that I communicate with these students differently than I did back in 2010 when I first took the job. It's changed a whole lot. There are very few phone calls with these guys. So it's just different. I've got to tell a story. And I don't think anybody in here is part of this conversation. A couple years ago, the top right picture of the guy, and the female and the guy there on a date. So a couple years ago, it was before a game. So what happens for us on game days? I'll just give you a little bit of background. We kind of got it. We got to get there. We get there 4 hours early, and we quick set up our sideline tarps and all this stuff. And it takes us 45 minutes to an hour, maybe, depending on what's all going on. And then we just kind of have this downtime before the game starts. And so we're just sitting in the shop, just guys talking. And one of the guys mentions he got a girl's phone number earlier in the week. And so I just, making conversation. So did you call her yet? And without hesitation, he just kind of laughed and said, call her. Why would I do that? I was like, well, what's the point of getting her phone number? He's like, no. You got to do the Snapchat, you got to text them, you got to do all this stuff, but to call her would be really weird. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, you really don't call her? She goes, no. He goes, I've been texting with her the last couple of nights. We've had good conversations that way. Like, interesting. And we had one female on staff at the time, and it was like, all right, so if you gave I'm asking her, like, if you gave your phone number out, what would you do if a guy called you? Would that be weird? And she responds with, no, I think it actually would mean that he really likes me. I'm like, okay, that seems reasonable, right? So downstairs where our shop is currently, we have this kind of buffet line that goes through for all of the working staff. Okay, so there's probably a couple hundred people that go through there. Maybe not quite a couple hundred, but at least 100. And there's obviously a lot of young females that work throughout the day. So we just started taking a poll. I would ask them, at least the ones I was somewhat familiar with and kind of maybe knew. Like, all right, hey, if you were to give your number to a guy, wherever, it doesn't matter, would you think it's weird to get a phone call? And then if they did call you, what would you think? Right? Those are kind of the two questions. They're like, well, man, usually, basically they're like, oh, yeah, that really never happens anymore. But if somebody were to just call me, I would think that they really like me. And I was like, 100%. Not one didn't say that. So then I'm looking at the 6 guys or 7 guys that I have on my crew, all of them that are single because they have no game, right? I'm like, guys, I just gave you the golden ticket. Like, it's real easy. Just get a phone number and then call them. Like, this doesn't seem hard at all. You've already separated yourself from the other 30,000 boys on campus, right? They still don't do that. Idiots. So anyway, it's changed, though. When I first started dating my wife, I was on a phone that actually had a cord, and to get a private conversation, I had to walk out into my garage because it was a really long cord, and I could shut the door kind of on the cord. It would make my dad mad, but whatever. And I could sit in the garage where it wasn't totally freezing cold in Michigan. Winters were a little nippy, and I could have a conversation with her privately. There was no text, right? So it's just different now, and we have to understand that. This is pretty much what it looks like on campus for me when my guys go out from the shop, right? Nonstop on their phone. I actually had a student a couple years ago who was a huge Braves fan, like obsessive. And it's like, dude, they're not even good anymore. Chipper Jones is gone. And he would, if I knew that if they had an afternoon game, it was like my best way to manage that situation was to put him on a mower by himself so he could listen to the baseball game. Otherwise, he would be on his phone checking it. I mean, if he was doing an irrigation fix or something, oh, man, it would have been one scoop here. Did he swing and miss? One scoop. It's just, it didn't work, right? And I could have that fight like, you need to leave your phone in the light. But that's not going to, then how am I going to communicate with him, right? There's always that whatever. So it's just different now. Social media. These are all the options that I know of. There's probably more. What am I missing, guys? Come on, there's some other ones. What was the video one that you... Marco Polo. That's one that I didn't add on this. My wife had this app. I didn't even know what it was. I'm like, what? Oh, jeez. You're right, Tinder. That's one. Didn't put that one up there either. So all of these things, right, all on their phone. I use my phone for all of those, except for Marco Polo. I don't have that one. I guess I did put it up there. I forgot. I added that one. Actually, I'm going to take a quick poll. Is there anybody in here that doesn't have a smartphone? First time I've had that. So I've asked that question about, like I said, a half a dozen times or so when I gave this generational talk. And I've always at least had one guy, and he only had it because he was still proud of it, right? He's like, nope, not giving in. But he's going to be like, hey, man, can you look at the weather for me, right? So first time. So it took, when did we do that talk, Joel? 4 years ago? 5 years ago? 4 or 5 years ago? So it took 4 years to get a room that didn't have anybody that didn't have a smartphone, right? Make a call. I still call my dad quite often, my brother. But yeah, even at work, my superiors get texts or emails a lot of times. You just don't make those phone calls very often. So, communication types. Any questions on that or anything to add? How are we doing on time? Oh, we're doing all right. All right. How to motivate all of your employees. Kind of what buttons you're going to push, personality traits. Okay. So there's a lot of words on this. I'm going to give you a minute to. I'm going to kind of explain it here in a second. I'm going to give you a minute to read it. Hopefully you can read it. Can you guys read that at all? This is called an enneagram or enneagram, however you want to say it. My wife asked me to read a book this fall. I use it, so to give you a little bit of background, I bow hunt, and usually that's my time to not really have a whole lot going on in my mind. I try to, and I usually will read. Okay, it's like the one time a year that I'll actually take the time to read. And she asked me to read this book. And I think it was called A Way Back to You or something. It was another Christian-type based book. But this, how'd you say that? The Enneagram. Road Back to You, there you go. So you've read it. I read half of it. Well, let me finish. I read half of it, and I was just like, I would have to read this thing 10 times to really be able to comprehend what I would need to gather from it. So I actually listened to the second half. So I did at least hear all the words or read all the words. Good book. I thought the last chapter was about the only thing you really need to know, and that's basically we're all different, and we all need a little bit of love, right? And so, and that was a huge. But what I want you to do is I'm going to give you a minute or two to kind of read this if you can. If you got to come up here and read it, whatever. But try to figure out, and there is, in the book, it obviously breaks down, there was 10 chapters to the book. A chapter for each of the individual kind of personality traits, and then the last one to kind of sum it up. Try to maybe kind of figure out what you are. And so how this works, where'd my pointer go? How it works is you all have one that's kind of your base, right? So let's just pick perfectionist. Like that's the one that maybe is like your, it's just who you are. It's just your personality, right? You're not going to change your personality. But that ties into whether, things are going well or whether you're stressed into one that's kind of connected to it. So, like this would be one that maybe might be your stress personality, and this might be one where like you're in kind of a comfort personality. That makes sense. Like I'm probably butchering this a little bit. And then there's also like things like right next to you that you might have traits of. Okay? So that's like a super quick generalization of the whole thing. Marty's at least like nodding his head like I'm not completely moronic about it, right? So kind of read these real quick. I'm going to give you like a minute or two just so you have an idea of just kind of like, again, self-reflection. Take a look at it. If you want me to read these, can you guys read them? I see Jared like squinting. I don't know if he just needs glasses or... Okay. So one of them will be like what you are like in a stressful situation, and one of them will be you'll bring tendencies in when you're stressed, and then you'll also bring tendencies of another one that's attached. I forget which way they go, but of when you're kind of at ease and in comfort, Okay, so when things are like good. So we have a giver, and we have a protector, and a mediator. Anybody else want to share? Yeah. Number 5, observer. Mike, no, he did leave. My old boss was one of those for sure. Just a thinker. Like, you don't come to him at 4 in the afternoon and have him make a decision on something somewhat important. That's a bad idea for those guys. Like, you got to just throw him an email and let him think about it for a day or two. The Road Back to You. Yep.
It goes healthy, average, unhealthy state. And all those affect how you may respond to something. When I'm in an extremely healthy state, I become a giver. And number 2, when I'm under stress or unhealthy, I go down to 5 and become an observer.
Yep. So I'm this one. I'm a 3, and in times of stress, I become a 9, which in the book, it's kind of more like you might struggle to start, right? And like so you can, it's not lazy, but it's like you might just be so overwhelmed. And then when I'm comfortable, I can do this one, which kind of, I can plan and do those kind of things. So, yeah. And it's not perfect. The idea was not to figure out what you are and who you are. The idea is to know that there are lots of different personalities, and when you're leading people, this is another one I was gonna have you guys. This is another personality one, right? Some other person, so you don't have the perfect 9. You're one of these. This one actually breaks down to 16. So I'm just going to give you a minute or two to go through this one and make you think about, extrovert, introvert. I would have told you until about 4 or 5 years ago that I was an extrovert. I am not. I'm an introvert. Talking in front of people does not bother me. I thought that made me an extrovert. The reality of it is, at the end of a day or an end of a conference like this, I'm extremely exhausted and I need a little bit of me time. Okay, so that's how I just, that's what that means. And so, again, go through this and then we'll go to the next slide and you can kind of figure out where you are within this personality test. All right, hopefully you guys got that. Again, this is kind of a breakdown of those. I'm this one within this test. So the point was, you will not be able to lead everybody on your staff the same way. All right? At least I don't believe that you can. Because there's just going to be personalities that don't take kindly to direct conversation. There's going to be personalities that they've got to think about something before they can react to it. There's going to be personalities that, whatever it is, they're just going to be different. Everybody on my crew has a different personality, right? And so you have to, which there goes back to that relationship. You have to have enough relationship with them to know kind of what they're about, how they react to different situations, to potentially be able to lead them in a way that not only, that honors them and motivates them, right? And so all of this was food for thought, mostly to drive home, you will not be able to lead everybody on your crew the same way. It will not work. Yes?
At our company, we've done it over 30 years in this Army system. It's called person analysis, and it's exactly what you're talking here. That we use it as a hiring tool.
Mm-hmm.
Because over 30 years, our managers fit a certain personality. It's called your child graph, your adult graph, and it's basically what you're doing.
Yep.
But it also helps us manage, because I know if I've got a manager in a stressed situation, how I can approach him better or not approach him at all at that point in time, or when he's really happy, I can ask for a minute and I'll get it.
Right.
But it's a tool that we use at our company, and it really helps in hiring, because certain managers just fit. You can hire somebody outside of that, and they'll for what we're asking them to do.
So that's a great point. So, they've taken it one step further and not just hiring somebody and then figuring out what they are. It's sounds like you're almost making them do a personality test before you hire them to almost make sure that they fit, which, that's awesome. And so, again, the same principle applies, understanding what the person is, what drives them, and how you're going to be able to motivate them. It's just going to be different for different people. All right, same thing, same point, just a couple more different ways to look at it. You can categorize it in 4 different ways, focus, whatever. I thought this was funny, so I put it in there. This guy just wanted a cheeseburger, right? Half glass, half full, whatever. The millennials. This term, I use it mostly as a negative connotation towards my guys, mostly to make fun of them in some sort of way that we're trying to joke around with. But this is seriously the definition. So when I Google, I just put in millennials, and that, how they always have a definition right away on the top of Google. So this is what that was. In the last one, the industry brims with theories on what makes millennials tick, right? It actually made me laugh out loud when I read it, and it was just funny because what I've said to the guys that work for me that are in this generation, right, is nobody's giving you guys any shot, right? And you have all of the opportunity in the world to just prove them all wrong, right? The world will tell you that a millennial is lazy. I would argue that I have some of the hardest working people I've ever worked with, right? That millennials don't care about anything but themselves. I disagree. I have guys that pick each other up all the time, that help each other, right? And so I call BS to some of this stuff, but yeah, there's a few that we've had that I didn't mind when they graduated because they kind of fit it. They probably, mom and dad were still paying the bills for them. There's a little bit of that stuff that was probably still going on. But for the most part, in Iowa, I'm a little bit spoiled. I have some kids that were a lot like me. They wanted to be a farmer, but weren't going to inherit land. Okay, so they figured out a different way. And so I'm a city farmer, and many of them want to be the same, okay? And so they're hardworking guys. They're going to be blue-collar their whole life, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? And so it's just a funny deal. All right. Failure. I am a firm believer in you will learn the most out of your failures, okay? And I have failed plenty of times and learned a ton. And I hope that the people that are in this room that have worked for me in the past would say the same. Like, there were places that I didn't really want them to fail, right? Like, our stadium field is a place of very little tolerance and failure. So we just take them over to the practice fields, and we learn to paint there, right? And you can fail there. But we've had some things happen in the stadium field that weren't necessarily failures, but mistakes made, and it's grass. It grows back. We overthink it too much. So you guys all send guys out when it's too wet, right? And what was funny about this picture is he calls me, which actually usually doesn't happen. Usually the guys, when they get in trouble, they call each other first to try to get it fixed before anybody knows, right? But he was the only one working that afternoon. So he had to call me. And so I go over there. He's like, I'm stuck. So I just take like a gator or something, right? And I get over there, and I was like, how? Why are you... How is your rear tire not even visible anymore? And his response, I kid you not, was, I thought it was dry. I'm like, really? So I take this picture, and I include it. I actually had to go back to Twitter to find it because I didn't have it on my phone anymore. It was a couple years ago. Best response I've ever had on a picture from Twitter was somebody asked, did you drop that from a plane? Right? Oh, funny. But he learned, okay, I think if it's a lot of wet, I might want to walk out there first, right? This one. So, a little backstory. I got 20 minutes or so probably. So last year, our team made improvements, and we were able to go to a bowl again. We went down to the Liberty Bowl. This was a year ago. And we get back from the Liberty Bowl, and we get back in, and we were putting out all the luggage. So we kind of ship the luggage down for everybody and then ship it back in a semi. And we put all the luggage in our indoor for people to come and get. And we were starting to do this, and there's this car in there. Like, whose car is this? So we run the plates, and it's like some third-string nobody lineman, right? And what happens after a bowl game is the guys will all play the bowl game, and then they fly back to their homes. So this thing was going to be here for another, week and a half, 2 weeks. And so the director of ops is all mad. We're kind of like, dude, you can't park cars in the indoor. And the director of ops is mad. Coach Campbell's, not happy about it. Who does this kid think he is? Somehow he snuck this thing in here without anybody knowing, right? So it's just sitting there in our indoor, kind of in the way, kind of not because it really wasn't going on. But so between a couple of us, we had this funny idea, we should just put it up on blocks. So when he gets back, we send him the message this was a bad idea. Don't park in here, right? Our director of ops sends a group text out of the car up on blocks. Everybody's laughing, thinks it's funny. Our AD comes in to get his luggage. Good guy, super reasonable. I love the man with all my heart. He does not think this is funny at all. Sends a text to my boss. So it kind of, for the hierarchy, it's kind of our AD, and then there's a bunch of associate ADs, and then I'm kind of right below that, right? So my direct boss, he gets the text, or he might have got a phone call. This is how people lose their jobs. Make it right. So I get a text about 8 o'clock at night. Now, mind you, we were all laughing about this all day. I had never actually put a car on blocks. Works really well. 4 center blocks, put a car on it. It's real fun. So I get the text. We need to put the tires back on the car immediately tomorrow morning. Okay, no problem. Message sent. So we go, we make it right, we put the tires back on. Campbell's like, whatever, And our AD went into the office of my boss that next morning and said, I want to know who did it. And it was me and another guy that's an equal of mine, so just 2 directors. And my boss, Chris, said, I okayed it. It doesn't matter who did it. And he's like, no, I really want to know who did it. It's like, I okayed it, and it doesn't matter who did it. It's correct, right? So this is my boss. That guy showed more character in that situation than I think I've had. I mean, who's not going to follow him, right? Who doesn't want to work for that guy now? He could have thrown me under the bus. I don't think I would have got fired, but I probably would have been reprimanded in some way. Jamie, our AD probably knew who did it because he knows who has the tools, and so I'm pretty sure he knows who did it. But he was never given a name, right? So that was a situation where we made a mistake, well, at least perceived from our AD's viewpoint, and we learned from it. No longer put cars on blocks. Student athletes' cars, off limits. Got it. Message sent. Nobody got in trouble. Well, yeah, he already knew he was in trouble when his girlfriend or whatever brought the spare key and got it out of there that next day. I had many mentors at Michigan State. My professors, Dr. Rogers, Dr. Crum, John Sorokin, all these guys, and then I had the privilege to work for Amy Foudy too, and she made me read a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and it was like the summertime. Like, who reads books in the summer? And she's like, we're gonna meet, every so often and talk about it. And Jared's laughing because I think she still does it with some of the people sometimes. And I was super annoyed by it, and I put it off, and finally she's like, no, we're reading this book. You're reading this book. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll read this book. Best thing, she's done a lot for me. Best thing she ever made me do was read this book. And if you have not read this book, I would encourage you to do so. That said, I'm going to kind of go through, it's not a chapter, there's kind of a section with multiple segments to it called Be a Leader, okay? And it just kind of highlights what it kind of takes to be a leader, and then how you should use that to motivate your employees. So for instance, when there's a mistake made, instead of getting angry at that person and putting them down for that, you might want to start it with, I've made this same mistake. So when the mower was stuck, I can still remember when I first buried this first Ransoms out front deck mower out on the golf course. They actually sent me out because they thought I would be the least likely to get stuck, and it maybe took me 10 minutes, right? Buried this four-wheel drive mower. So it's like, for me to get angry at that kid who buried that Toro 4000 makes no sense because I've done it, right? And so if you start it with that, like, well, been there, that's why I can walk places now before I start mowing it, and you will too, right? So it doesn't do me any good to be angry about that. So situations like that to relate, no one likes to take orders. Instead, just make suggestions. So how I run it, and I don't know if this is good leadership or not. I think sometimes it gets frustrating for Josh and I, but we'll put all of our jobs up on a board. And I don't necessarily assign them to anybody. We'll maybe prioritize them. There might be situations like if we're spraying, it's like, okay, you need to spray because you have the license and you know how to run our sprayer. But for the most part, we just put it up on a board, and we let all the guys figure out where they're going to go. And so I'm not necessarily dictating it in the morning. This is what needs to be done. Let's get it done, right? And so I think that works well. Maybe it works better for this next generation that doesn't like to be told exactly what to do. I don't know, but it works well for us. On game day, we do a little bit, mostly just to stay organized. So it's like, all right, first quarter, you've got the field goal net. Second quarter, you've got the field goal. But it's not necessarily, and it's usually, I do that one. It's about the only time we do it really out of rank. And so, like, we have to pick up garbage at the gates in the first quarter and the third quarter. So the people that are new get both shifts. Everybody else just gets the first one because the third quarter is not as bad, so you don't need as many people. So we do that. But on game day, it's a little bit different. But yeah, day to day, typically that's how we run it. This is where, to humiliate someone in public, it's probably not a good idea anyway. And this book was written in like the 30s. Might even been earlier than that. But it's super, super helpful. Give a dog a bone. How often do you guys say thank you at the end of the day to your guys? Every day. Good. Because let's be honest, without the people working for you, you will look really bad at your job, right? And so to give thanks for that and let them know, man, you guys mean a lot to me, and I could not do it without you, I think means a lot. I know it always meant a lot to me. I was definitely like a words of affirmation person, right? I like to be patted on the back and said, nice job. And so for you to, as a leader, to be able to do that for the guys, I think is the same thing. You've got to just do that almost on a daily basis. So yeah, that was kind of this chapter. You can read through those. I think I've still got some time here. Okay, we got some time. All right, so this was this year. We have a cross-country course that is arguably the highest maintained cross-country course in the country. Actually, it's not even an argue. It will be an argue soon because Oklahoma State's now building a fully irrigated cross-country course like we have. I think they're spending like $2 or $3 million on theirs. Fortunately, we built our cross-country course in the 80s, and all we had to do was irrigate it. We started mowing it low, and now we're the highest maintained one. But our cross-country coach is my hardest-to-please coach. There have been few times where that guy has thrown me that compliment. Few. And they are super protective of their course. And we had a big meet coming up in the Big 12. So we had a meet last year, regionals, and this year we were hosting the Big 12s. And those guys spend a lot of time out on the course. So they've really taken a lot of ownership, and they've really helped us out. At first I was a little proud about it, like, man, why are you guys doing this? We can do it. But the reality of it is we don't have a lot of the man staff to do 20, 30 acres of this thing all the time. So we sent guys out to mow. We had a really wet summer, or really wet periods in the summer. I think this was the end of June, right? So we had a lot of time left before the Big 12s in October. For like 4 months, 5 months. But it was really wet, and we told the guys, we sent out 2 mowers, and what we do is we mow the 48 or the 40 feet wide trail with 1.5 inches. We mow them at 1.5 inches, and then everything else is like 3.5. So it's kind of got that fairway to rough look, okay? And it's really cool in the middle of summer. If you actually get a drought when we irrigate, it's kind of got this like bright green beacon of a road that goes through this course. Send the guys out, and what made me really mad about this one was we said, if you guys start tracking, just get off. Like, we had 4 or 5 inches of rain that week, but it was like over a week period, and the grass was getting really long. We had to try to mow. Well, I get a phone call not an hour and a half later, after the guys had come back and said, we mowed as much as we could, we didn't make any tracks, or if we did, we got off right away. Like, okay, so we shouldn't get a phone call. I get a phone call from the coach, or one of the coaches, and he's not real happy. And I'm like, man, I haven't been out there. I don't know what's going on. But if it is marked up, it's my fault. It's on me. I sent him out there. We made the call, and I'll go look at it. So I go out there, and this is what it looks like. Most of it's just, these are the worst spots. Most of it was like this. It was just a track on wet grass, made it kind of muddy. It was gone after the next mowing, right? A lot of it was just superficial damage, but there were a lot of those, okay? More than what I would have expected after we had a really pointed conversation. And so I kind of lost my mind on the guys. I don't yell very often. But when it happens, it's like a volcano. It just erupts. And I did my best version of getting angry at them. And I sent those 2 out to kind of rake out these areas and make it better and smooth it out. Well, then the head coach comes out. He's way better at yelling than I am. And he communicated very effectively towards these 2 guys. One of them, he's a hockey player, right? He's a big dude. He goes, Tim, I didn't think we were getting out of there alive. Like, fair enough. But the point of this is, I told the coaches it was my fault. Now, I didn't do it, and I had warned them, so I wasn't going to be the one to fix it. Like, they were going to fix it. That's kind of one of our standing rules. You break an irrigation head with an air fryer, I'll show a video here in a second, you get to fix it. It's not a real big deal. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to scream. Go get a head in the irrigation closet, go fix it. They were fixing it, and they got yelled at. But they learned. It was a mistake that was made, and we won't make it again, hopefully. Real quick, I read an article a couple years ago. She started this, what's it called, like Student Maid, okay? And what she was a college student at Florida University, wanted to buy an $80 pair of jeans and didn't have the money, and her parents weren't going to buy it for her. They said, get a job. So she started cleaning a house for somebody, making money, bought her jeans. Well, that business, it just kept spiraling and created a business, and so she started hiring other students that she went to school with to help her. And so she created this business, all college students. And she had a bunch of things to say when it came to how to deal with millennials. Mostly allow them to make mistakes, which is something I kind of figured out a long time ago, mostly because I had made them and learned a lot from them. You can read all these, but let them struggle to make it right. That's kind of where I come up with, like, well, if you're going to mark it up or you're going to break an irrigation head, well, then you go fix it, right? That's just how it is. Failure is important to reflect and grow. So if you're not letting some of these failures happen at your workplace, I think you're, maybe possibly shorten it an opportunity for somebody to learn a little bit. This is the big one. If you are that leader and you are the person in charge and you make a mistake, it's really important for those guys to see it and understand and you admit it. Something I work with my kids is admitting when you mess up, right? Man, is that hard for a lot of people. I have one out of my 3 right now in the home. It's like, I can't even be mad at you if you just come up and say, yeah, I screwed up, I'm sorry. I can't. It just diffuses the whole thing, right? But, man, she struggles with that one. Communication failed a couple years ago when I was at Northwestern. I was trying to kill Poa annua. I succeeded. This is our spring game. This is the morning of our spring game. Looks good, right? I had gotten it okayed by my administrators this fall before to spray ProGrass over the winter, okay? And we had the perfect winter for it. I was able to make an application in late November, and then I was able to make one right after Christmas because we didn't have any snowfall yet, and then I was able to make another one in early March. And lo and behold, there wasn't a lot of POA left. Now, what you're going to ask maybe is, why'd you have so much POA in the first place? We're not here to talk about that. So we killed a lot of POA. In this picture, I was super excited. One, I killed POA. I love killing POA. I actually, it's one of my favorite topics to talk about. What people didn't know in this picture was I had already put out 1,000 pounds of ryegrass, and we had seedlings growing like crazy, right? And it wasn't going to look like this for very much longer. Coach, however, was not pleased because he had recruits, and it didn't look real good. So he was not happy. I had to assure him that in the long run, one, I had messed up, and I should have communicated to him, not the administrators. I had assumed the administrators were going to tell him. Terrible assumption. Now I just deal right with the coach. It looked like that that fall, right? So all in all, it worked out fine. Just was a bad deal at first. All right, I'm going to try this. I've got a couple videos. This is a video that one of my guys made of me a couple years ago. I think it's the one and only time that I've actually painted our practice fields in the last 5 years. But here you go. Hopefully the sound works.
That makes sense. That doesn't. Good job, Tim.
He actually followed. It must have cut it off. He said, "Nice job, Tim," in the video. So he made sure it was me, and that was his little Snapchat to everybody else. So we flipped that field, and it was really hard to see anything. And I'm just going along and paint the little triangle that I could see, and then I get to the 0, and the 3 is like, "Oh, that was dumb," But then you have to paint the other one because it actually made sense for the next week. Here's another one.
What do you say?
Blake, this guy just did a very good impression of what you would do with an air fryer. This guy right here, Jake.
Hit a head.
He hit a head, didn't realize it. Now the ground's all flooded. Just wanted you to know. It's your buddy Jake.
I'm a dumbass.
Just continuing your trend. See you, buddy. Hope all's well. So we sent that to, well, Blake's not in here, I don't think. So we sent that to Blake, who had hit 3 heads the previous year. He was kind of my air fire guy, right? I'm like, dude, why are you getting so close to these? And so when Jake did it, it was on my throws area track. It didn't matter much, but it was this really wet area. And he had mowed it earlier. He's like, man, there's a really wet spot. So we checked the irrigation, and we were fixing it at that point. But so we sent it to Blake, as in like, hey, buddy, you're not the only one that's ever done this. So he learned from that. Lastly, this is kind of that relationships thing. We have a little fun. I got a couple minutes, so. Cool. So we have a little fun. The bike races in the shop, that's just catch me. We'll explain that. That was a whole lot of fun. 1981 Trivial Pursuit. We found one of those in this thing we cleaned out this year, and so we started doing that at lunch. Oh, man, that's funny. Some of my guys just are really terrible at geography. Oh, it's fun. This is one we did for an intern last year. Last day. He about hit the building with the mower, so that could have ended badly. So that was just a little fun with one of our interns. This was actually not recently. If you follow me on Twitter, you would have saw this recently. If you don't, here's a treat for you. This is our last snowstorm. They're trying to sled.
You're not sliding!
You just got to wait for it. It gets better.
This is what happens to college kids. They're not real smart. Oh boy. Train wreck. Unbelievable. That guy there says he's an athlete. You saw it there.
Oh. So, have to have relationships, have to have fun. Create a work environment where they can fail, right? Understand that people are all different personalities and that you might have to lead each one of them a little bit different. But that starts with asking them, what makes them tick, who are they, what they get excited about, that kind of thing. Final thoughts. You can read that quote there. I think I have. So my guys is a term that I use a lot. And honestly, what motivates me anymore is that they're proud to be called my guys, right? At the end of my career, as I see guys that have worked in the past for me, I hope that I made an impression and it was a good one, right? And probably the greatest compliment I get now is phone calls for, usually it's not about growing grass, which actually makes me really excited. Because let's be honest, the growing grass is pretty easy sometimes. This fall was terrible. We'll talk about that some other day. But, for career advice, life advice, some of the times where I've been humbled, I was a groomsman a couple years ago for one of them. This is by far my most humbling experience, was asking to marry a kid that started working for me as a football player. Honestly, he was borderline useless for me. I literally made him water sod for like 2 months straight. Okay? Once he stopped being a football player, he continued to work for me, and I didn't think that I had an impact on him as much as I did until he came back from his second internship in Seattle and asked a girl to marry him and said, "Hey, we're going to get married in Italy. I want you to do the service for me." And I'm like, "What?" And then my wife and I worked through a book with them and had a really nice opportunity to just kind of help them get started. And man, that was a whole lot of fun. If you guys have any questions for me, there's my information. I'll be here all conference. I hope you at least provoked some thought, and it wasn't a complete waste of your 8 o'clock to 9:15 hour. So, thank you.